The air in the chamber of resonant truth was cold, thin, and tasted of sterilized ozone, and the faint, metallic tang of active hard light displays. It was a place designed for pure logic, where emotion was an atmospheric contaminant to be scrubbed and vented. Kalen Var, strategist of the third cadre, stood at the focal point of the chamber, my 6 limbs held in a posture of formal deference, my optic sensors fixed upon the dais where the eldest confluence shimmered. They were ancient, their crystalline carapaces so dense with accumulated data they barely refracted the chamber's sterile light. Above them, all floated the prime resonator, its form a complex latticework of energy and crystal, the apex of Glishan consciousness. You have requested this confluence on a matter you deem of existential priority. Strategist Var, the prime resonator's voice echoed, not as sound, but as a direct vibration in the resonant frequency of my own mind. It was a pure, dispassionate transmission of data. The hegemony's resources are allocated according to strict probability matrices. This interruption has already cost us 0.001% of our projected efficiency for this cycle. We trust your analysis merits the expenditure. I inclined my primary sensor cluster. Prime resonator, eldest confluence, it does. My analysis pertains to the species designated humanity and the hegemony's proposed strategy of proactive containment. A flicker of derision pulsed from one of the confluence members, Lither of the 9th Cadre, my chief rival, and a staunch advocate for the containment plan. His carapace momentarily shifted to a deep, dismissive violet. Containment is a logical imperative. The species is chaotic, expansionist, and emotionally volatile. Its technological ascent is dangerously steep. Allowing it unchecked access to the Orion Spur is an unacceptable risk. Strategist Lither's assessment is consistent with the primary data, resonated the Prime. They are fractious. They war amongst themselves. Their political structures are ephemeral. Their history is a litany of self-inflicted catastrophes. Why do you contest this conclusion, Kalen Var? This was the crux of it, the chasm of understanding I had to bridge. Because the primary data is dangerously incomplete. We have observed their chaos, but we have failed to analyze the patterns within it. We have cataloged their volatility, but we have mistaken its nature. Specifically, we have misinterpreted their most dangerous quality as a weakness. I speak of their patience. A wave of skepticism washed through the chamber, a subtle shift in the ambient resonance. Lither's violet deepened. Patience. Strategist, they are creatures of impulse. They react to slights with outrage, to threats with bluster. We have thousands of cycles of their own communications intercepts to prove it. They are anything but patient. That, I said, letting my voice modulator add a fraction more gravity, is a surface-level analysis. What you perceive as impatience is their reaction to internal squabbles, a constant, low-level friction they have evolved to manage. It is background noise. What I am referring to is their patience when dealing with an external, persistent, and calculated pressure. In these scenarios, they do not react with impulse. They absorb, they tolerate, they document, they warn. And they are consistently, fatally underestimated because of it. They do this until a threshold is crossed. It is not an emotional outburst. It is a calculated decision. And when that decision is made, the response that follows is not chaotic. It is precise, irreversible, and strategically absolute. The prime resonator remained a silent, intricate web of light. You make a significant claim, strategist, provide evidence, a verifiable case study. I will provide 3, I replied, activating the hollow projector at my station. A star chart shimmered to life in the center of the chamber. I focused it on a dim, insignificant system on the fringe of charted space. Case Study 1, The Dryad's Lament. Designation, Outpost Series 7. An independent human mining colony on a barren moon, population 212. The aggressor, a corporate entity of the Xylos Collective, a species known for its acquisitive and bullying nature. The projection shifted, showing the gray, pockmarked surface of the moon and the small cluster of biodomes that was the human outpost. Another, larger, and more aggressive-looking mining operation was situated a mere 50 kilometers away. The Xylos coveted the moon's rich deposits of heavy metals, I explained. Direct confrontation was deemed inefficient, so they began a campaign of calculated harassment. For 8 standard months, they tested the humans. It began with signal jamming, interfering with the colony's communications. The humans logged the interference, rerouted through a backup satellite, and sent a formal complaint to the Xylos Corporation. The complaint went unanswered. Lither scoffed, the resonance a sharp, grating chord. A complaint. How predictably feeble. Indeed, I continued, ignoring him. Next, the Xylos began claim jumping, using their heavier machinery to push the boundaries of their mining concession into human-surveyed territory. The humans responded by erecting physical boundary markers and sending another message, this one more firmly worded, citing interstellar property compacts. They were, again, ignored. The Xylos then escalated to direct equipment interference. Small, automated drones would sabotage human mining rovers. Nothing catastrophic, just cut fuel lines, damaged manipulators. Minor, irritating, and deniable acts. The chamber was silent. The confluence was observing the data stream. They saw what Lither saw, a species that responded to aggression with paperwork and fence building. A species that was weak. The humans documented every incident. They collected evidence. They sent 3 more diplomatic communiques, each detailing the escalating pattern of harassment and warning of consequences if it did not cease. The Xylos, viewing this as further proof of human timidity, decided to deliver a final, crushing blow to the colony's morale. They abducted a human geologist, a woman named Aris Thorne, who was surveying a new vein near the contested border. I paused, letting the statement settle in the cold air. The Xylos broadcast a message to the colony, claiming Thorne had trespassed and would be held for reparations. They expected negotiations, concessions, a groveling plea. They expected the humans to fold. A logical assumption based on prior behavior, the prime reciter noted. It was a fatal miscalculation, I stated, because the abduction of a person was the threshold. For 240 days, the humans had absorbed property damage, economic disruption, and intimidation. They had been patient. They had given warnings. The Xylos had ignored them all. The moment Aris Thorne was taken, the human patience threshold was crossed. The decision was made. I magnified the display. It now showed a single, heavily modified human mining vessel lifting off from the colony. It was not a warship. It carried no traditional armaments. 23 minutes after the Xylos broadcast their ransom demand, this ship, the Rock Breaker, approached the Xylos operation. The Xylos hailed them, likely with taunts. The Rock Breaker did not respond. Its manifest showed its primary cargo bay was filled with a full load of deep-core seismic penetration charges, standard equipment for asteroid mining. The display shifted to a tactical simulation based on the event's data logs. The Rock Breaker did not fire on the Xylos base. It did not engage their defense platforms. It flew a precise, pre-calculated pattern over the geological fault lines beneath the Xylos operation. Fault lines the humans had meticulously mapped over the preceding months. It then released its entire payload, not at the base, but into the planetoid's crust. The simulation showed the charges detonating deep underground. The ground beneath the sprawling Xylos complex did not explode. It simply liquefied. The carefully engineered seismic cascade caused a catastrophic substrate collapse. The entire multi-billion credit Xylos operation, their drills, their refineries, their habdomes, their command center, slid gracefully into a newly formed chasm 2 kilometers deep. The collapse was so precise that the dust barely settled on the human boundary markers 50 kilometers away. Total Xylos casualties, 1,402. Total human casualties, 0. The geologist, Aris Thorne, was recovered from the wreckage of the Xylos command shuttle, which had attempted to lift off and was caught in the landslide. She was the sole survivor. The humans did not conquer the moon. They did not claim the Xylos equipment. They simply issued a single, system-wide broadcast. Interference with Series 7 operations has ceased. Then they went back to work. I let the silence hang in the chamber, a heavy, cold thing. This was not an emotional outburst, eldest confluence. It was an extermination executed with the cold precision of a mathematical proof. They absorbed months of provocations to gather data. They endured insults and theft to map the aggressor's tactics, and more importantly, the geology of the battlefield. They gave clear, repeated warnings, establishing a legal and moral justification in their own minds. And when the line was crossed, they did not engage in a fight. They enacted a solution. They did not defeat their enemy, they erased the problem. This is the pattern I have come to warn you about. This is the nature of human patience. The chamber remained still, but the quality of the silence had changed. The faint hum of skepticism was gone, replaced by the low, resonant thrum of focused calculation. The prime resonator's crystalline form pulsed with a slow, thoughtful rhythm. My first data point had been logged, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of hope that they were beginning to understand the precipice on which we stood. The prime resonator's light shifted from a neutral silver to a piercing, analytical blue. The data is anomalous. A single incident involving a primitive corporate entity and an isolated group of colonists. It demonstrates a capacity for disproportionate response, but it could be an outlier. A species is not defined by the actions of a few hundred individuals on a forgotten rock. Show us a larger scale. Show us this pattern at the level of planetary governance. Lither seized the opportunity to interject, his carapace flashing a skeptical amethyst. The strategist presents a dramatic anecdote, a clever trick by a desperate colony. To suggest this is indicative of species-wide behavior is a leap of logic unsupported by evidence. Their core worlds are mired in political infighting. They would never achieve the consensus required for such a focused response on a larger stage. Consensus is not always required for human action, I countered, bringing up the next data file. The star chart shifted, zooming into a vibrant yellow star orbited by 7 planets. Proxima Ceti. Case Study 2, the Ceti blockade. The aggressor, the Arvok matriarchy, a Tier 2 civilization, technologically superior to humanity at the time by a significant margin. The target, Proxima Ceti 5, a thriving human agricultural world, population 900 million. The Arvok, suffering from a blight affecting their homeworld's crops, sought to force the human colony into an exploitative trade agreement. They did not declare war. They did not attack. They established a quarantine, a full naval blockade of the planet. The display filled with images of the Arvok fleet. They were sleek, biological-looking vessels, oozing a quiet menace as they took up orbital positions. They were imposing, powerful, and impeccably restrained. The Arvok strategy was, by Glishan metrics, flawless. It was non-violent aggression. They severed the colony from interstellar trade, creating economic pressure. They broadcast their demands daily. 50 years of exclusive access to 75% of the colony's agricultural output in exchange for lifting the quarantine. They were patient. They believed the humans would eventually capitulate to inevitable starvation and economic ruin. And how did the humans respond? Lither's tone was laced with condescending curiosity, with more strongly worded letters. Initially, yes, I admitted. For 190 days, the humans of Proxima Ceti 5 did precisely what the Arvok and what you, strategist Lither, would expect. They protested through all available diplomatic channels. Their central government on Earth issued condemnations. The colonial authority filed grievances with the Galactic Compact. They attempted to run the blockade with small, fast ships, most of which were easily intercepted and impounded without a shot being fired. They appeared impotent, trapped, and weak. I let the data stream flow, showing the increasing desperation on the planet. News reports of rationing, political debates about submitting to the Arvok's demands. The Arvok matriarch in a broadcast referred to the humans as petulant children, making noise but incapable of action. The Arvok made the same mistake as the Xylos, I continued, my voice low and steady. They mistook patience for weakness. They saw tolerance as surrender. They failed to understand that during those 190 days the humans were not simply waiting. They were preparing. They were analyzing. They were calculating. And like the miners on Series 7, they were searching for a solution that did not involve a direct confrontation they knew they would lose. The threshold was crossed on day 191, not because of a dramatic event, but because an internal human calculation was completed. A planetary resource-to-survival projection returned a negative result. The slow decline had reached a tipping point. The decision was made. On that day, the colony launched a single, unassuming vessel. It was listed on the flight plan as a long-range survey probe. The Arvok let it pass, assuming it was a desperate attempt to seek help. It was not. The probe was not aimed at the Arvok fleet or their homeworld. Its destination was the Uit cloud and asteroid belt of the Arvok's own star system. I brought up a new simulation, this one showing the Arvok home system, a bustling hub of interstellar trade. The probe carried a swarm of self-replicating microconstructors, von Neumann probes, a technology the Arvok believed humans had not yet perfected. The swarm dispersed into the Arvok's primary asteroid belt. Its directive was simple: find nickel-iron asteroids, consume them, and replicate, but with one crucial modification. Each replicated constructor was also a kinetic engine. Their secondary directive was to use infinitesimally small trajectory adjustments to nudge their host asteroids into new, slightly altered orbits. Lither leaned forward, his primary manipulators gripping the edge of his console. Nonsense. The energy requirements to alter the orbits of millions of celestial bodies would be astronomical. Not if you have time, I corrected him. The changes were minute, fractions of a degree over months. The effect was not immediate. It was cumulative, a cascading symphony of gravitational chaos. It began subtly. A few shipping lanes had to be rerouted. An outer system sensor buoy went dark, then two, then a dozen. Within 6 months, the Arvok's primary navigational charts were becoming obsolete faster than they could be updated. Within a year, their home system, once a model of cosmic clockwork, had become a kinetic minefield. The carefully balanced orbits of thousands of asteroids were now a web of intersecting, unpredictable vectors. The simulation sped up, showing the elegant lines of Arvok trade routes dissolving into a maelstrom of red-flagged collision warnings. Shuttles were crushed. Orbital stations were forced to engage in constant, energy-draining avoidance maneuvers. A large freighter, miscalculating a new trajectory, was sheared in half by a rock that wasn't supposed to be there for another 1,000 years. The humans did not fire a single laser. They did not launch a single missile. They weaponized mathematics. They turned the Arvok's own system into a cage. The blockade of Proxima Ceti 5 became untenable as the Arvok fleet was desperately needed to protect their home system. But they couldn't just destroy the asteroids. They were too numerous, and the fragments would only create a more complex problem. They had to be moved, recharted one by one, a task that their own astrogators projected would take centuries and bankrupt their economy. 2 years after the blockade began, the Arvok matriarchy unconditionally withdrew their fleet. They sent a message to the human government demanding they cease their celestial terrorism. The human response was a single sentence: "We are not aware of any hostile action, but we are pleased that your navigational and supply chain issues at Proxima Ceti have been resolved." I closed the simulation. The chamber was profoundly silent. The implications were sinking in. The humans had not just defeated the Arvok, they had permanently hobbled them as a galactic power. They had responded to a temporary blockade with a permanent, self-perpetuating catastrophe. This was not rage, I pressed, my gaze sweeping across the stunned members of the confluence. This was a meticulously crafted checkmate. They endured hardship to buy time. They chose a target the Arvok could not defend without abandoning their aggression. And the retaliation was perfectly, poetically symmetrical. You blockade our world. We will make your entire system impassable. The consequence was not just punitive, it was educational. The entire galactic community learned that cornering humans results not in a fight, but in an innovative, unforeseen, and devastatingly permanent solution. And the Arvok are still, to this day, sweeping the mines from their own front yard. Lither's carapace was a mottled, uncertain gray. His usual confident posture was gone. The prime resonator's light had deepened to a contemplative indigo. "This pattern," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "is what we face. Our proactive containment strategy involves a subtle, genetically engineered blight designed to slowly reduce human fertility on their outer colonies. We believe it is deniable, untraceable. We believe they will perceive it as a natural plague. We believe they will be too busy dealing with the ensuing social chaos to notice our hand in it." I looked directly at the prime resonator. We are behaving like the xylos, poking and prodding, believing our actions are too small to provoke a meaningful response. We are behaving like the Arvok, applying a pressure we believe they cannot counter. We are making the same fundamental error in calculation. We are testing their patience. My final case study will demonstrate the consequences of crossing their ultimate threshold. It is a lesson that was learned by a species that is no longer here to share it. The resonant hum in the chamber was now one of pure, focused attention. The skepticism was gone, burned away by the cold light of data. In its place, something new was growing, a seed of doubt, and perhaps a sliver of fear. The prime resonator's voice, when it came, was a low, somber frequency that vibrated in my very bones. Proceed, strategist Var. We will hear of this vanished species. I took a moment, gathering my thoughts before initiating the final projection. The air in the chamber felt heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken possibilities. My own internal chronometer registered a slight increase in my core temperature, a physiological response to stress I had long since learned to control. This was the final, most crucial part of my argument. For many cycles, I began, Glycian cartographers have noted a region of space in the Perseus arm designated the Silent Veil, a sphere of space approximately 200 light-years in diameter, from which no signals emanate. Our deep space probes report systems that are technologically dark. Our consensus has been that the dominant species in that region, the Cathar Imperium, suffered a cataclysmic internal collapse or a technological regression. This conclusion is, like so many of our assumptions about this quadrant, incorrect. The star chart shifted, focusing on a vibrant, dense cluster of stars. This was the Cathar's former territory. The Cathar were, in many ways, similar to us. They were logical, ancient, and possessed of a deep-seated belief in their own biological and intellectual superiority. They were genetic purists. Their entire civilization was built upon the sanctity of their genome. To them, all other life was either a resource or a contamination. I superimposed a timeline onto the chart. 300 standard years ago, a Cathar long-range exploration vessel discovered a human colony on a world they designated Cathar Prime Prospect 7. We know it as Kepler 186f. The colony was young, pre-FTL, and completely unaware of the galactic community. To the Cathar, these humans were vermin squatting on a world their expansion models had already claimed. An overt invasion would have been simple for them, Lither murmured, his voice now devoid of its earlier arrogance, replaced by a tone of academic curiosity. Why did they not simply sterilize the planet from orbit? Efficiency and subtlety, I replied. The Cathar did not wish to damage the world's carefully balanced ecosystem, which they coveted, and they had a deep-seated aversion to messy, chaotic warfare. So they chose a more elegant solution, one that aligned with their mastery of genetic engineering. They designed a retrovirus. It was an inspired piece of biological warfare, airborne, waterborne, and completely invisible. It was not designed to kill. It was designed to do something they considered far more definitive. It targeted human reproductive cells, subtly altering them. The infected would live out their lives, healthy and unaware, but their children, if they had any, would be sterile. It was a weapon of generational extinction, a slow, quiet, patient genocide. The members of the confluence shifted, their crystalline forms grating softly. The concept was both alien and chillingly familiar to the logic of our own proposed containment strategy. The Cathar deployed the virus through atmospheric seeding via a single stealth vessel. They then withdrew and waited. They monitored the colony from a distance, watching their plan unfold with cold satisfaction. For 50 years, everything went according to their projections. The human colonists on Kepler 186f noted a steep decline in birth rates. They panicked. They blamed industrial toxins, radiation from their star, nutrient deficiencies in their food. They tore their own society apart looking for a cause, never once suspecting an external hand. I let the image of a confused, desperate human society play out on the display. It was a portrait of a people turning on themselves, exactly as the Cathar, and we had predicted they would. This, I said, pointing to the display, is the phase of human patience that is most deceptive. When faced with a threat they cannot identify, they exhaust every other possibility. They blame themselves, their environment, their own technology. They exhibit a capacity for introspection and self-doubt that species like the Cathar and our own would view as a profound weakness. But it is during this phase that they are at their most dangerous because they are learning, they are ruling out variables, they are narrowing their search. And they found it, the prime resonator stated. It was not a question. Yes, a human biologist, a woman named Alara Vance, finally isolated the viral agent. It took her a lifetime of work. On her deathbed, she identified the artificial markers within the genetic code, markers that bore the unmistakable signature of Cathar biology, cross-referenced from a galactic database of known species, genetics they'd acquired from a passing trader decades prior. The truth was revealed. They were not dying. They were being murdered slowly and silently. I paused. The colony of Kepler 186f, now numbering less than 1 million aging souls, did 3 things. First, they compiled all of Dr. Vance's research into a single, encrypted data packet. Second, they launched it from their planet on a sublight probe aimed at the heart of human space, a message in a bottle that would take decades to arrive. The message contained not a plea for help but a warning. It detailed the nature of the Cathar weapon and the identity of its creators. The final line of the message was not a call for revenge. It was a request. Do not let our silence be misunderstood. And the third thing they did, one of the Confluence members resonated. They fell silent. Every transmitter on the planet went dark. They knew there was no cure for them. They were the last generation. They accepted their fate, and so did the rest of humanity. Lither's form flashed with confusion. What do you mean? When the message arrived, surely their central government declared war, launched a punitive fleet. No, I said softly. That is what we would do. That is what the Arvok would have done. That is not what humanity did. When the message from Kepler 186f finally reached them, there was no public outcry. No declarations of war. No fleets were mobilized. The Cathar, who had been monitoring human communications, noted the silence and interpreted it as fear. They believed their weapon had been so terrifying that it had shocked their victims into submission. They grew complacent. They continued their expansion, their empire flourishing. This was the core of my warning. They did not understand that for humans, some wounds are too deep for shouting, some violations are too profound for threats. This was the crossing of the ultimate threshold, a direct, existential attack on their ability to have a future. And for that, the human response was not war, it was justice. And human justice is a far more terrifying concept than human warfare. I adjusted the holo display, pulling up classified data acquired by one of our most advanced deep-range sensor probes, a probe I had personally dispatched to the Silent Veil 3 cycles ago. For 20 years, humanity did nothing. During that time, their brightest minds in genetics and virology worked in secret. They did not try to cure the Cathar virus. They studied it. They reverse-engineered it. They perfected it. They took the Cathar's elegant weapon and turned it into a masterpiece of biological retribution. They designed their own virus, tailored with the same precision, but with a different target. The new virus did not cause sterility. It targeted a single, unique gene sequence in the Cathar genome, a sequence that allowed them to process the specific radiation of their home star, a crucial metabolic function without which they could not synthesize essential proteins from their food. It did not kill them. It simply turned off their ability to digest. A wave of utter horror washed through the chamber, a resonant frequency so sharp it was almost painful. The concept was grotesque, unthinkable to a species that drew energy directly from cosmic radiation. They delivered this new plague just as the Cathar had, a single, stealthy probe, a quiet, atmospheric release into the ecosystem of the Cathar homeworld. It spread through their population in less than a year. And then the effects began. The Cathar began to starve, not from a lack of food, but from an inability to draw sustenance from it. They were surrounded by plenty, yet wasting away. Their sun, the very source of their life and the center of their religion, had become a useless ball of light in their sky. Their greatest strength had been rendered impotent. The display showed the probe's final images from the Cathar system, cities falling into disrepair, A population growing gaunt and desperate. An empire not collapsing in fire and glory but withering on the vine, consumed by a quiet, inexorable famine under a warm and bountiful sun. Humanity never sent a fleet. They never claimed responsibility. They simply watched from afar as the Cathar Imperium slowly and quietly starved to death over the course of a single generation. The Silent Veil is not a region of space where a civilization collapsed. It is a tomb, a quarantine zone established and maintained by humanity to ensure the Cathar's disease remained their own. They did not defeat their enemy. They wrote a biological equation that resulted in their enemy's subtraction from the universe. I let the image of the dying Cathar world hang in the chamber's center, a silent, damning testament. Then I brought up the Glycian hegemony's own plan for proactive containment, displaying our proposed viral agent's genetic code next to the Cathar's original design. The similarities were undeniable. We proposed to do to them exactly what the Cathar did, I said, my voice resonating with all the force I could muster. We are standing on the same threshold. We are about to commit the same act of ultimate provocation. My question to this confluence is not whether the humans will discover our hand in it. They will. The question is what they will do when they make that discovery. They will not declare war. They will not send fleets. They will be patient. They will study us. They will learn how a crystalline entity processes logic. They will analyze the resonant frequencies that bind our collective consciousness. They will find the very core of what it means to be Glycian, and they will write a new equation. I looked from one stunned elder to the next, ending with the prime resonator, whose intricate light form was now a chaotic, flickering storm of colors I had never witnessed. We pride ourselves on our logic. It is the foundation of our existence. But what prime resonator? What is the logical counter to an enemy that responds to a biological attack by turning your own sun into a poison? What is the correct strategic response to a species that answers genocide not with anger, but with a perfectly tailored, species-specific law of physics? There is no counter, because we are not facing a chaotic, impulsive species. We are facing the universe's most patient and therefore most terrifying predator. I deactivated the display. The chamber plunged into a dim, oppressive silence, broken only by the faint hum of its life support. Lither was gone, having slipped away at some point during my final testimony. The remaining members of the eldest confluence were motionless, frozen in contemplation of an abyss they had not known existed. My report was done. My warning had been delivered. I had presented the data, the pattern, the inevitable conclusion. I offered a final, formal inclination of my sensor cluster to the prime resonator, whose form had coalesced into a deep, troubling violet, the color of profound uncertainty. Without waiting for dismissal, I turned and walked from the chamber of resonant truth. The decision was no longer mine to influence. It rested with them now, in the cold, sterile air where logic was supposed to reign supreme. But I had planted a seed of something beyond logic in that room, a rational, evidence-based, and deeply resonant fear. As the great doors slid shut behind me, I could only hope it would be enough to alter our trajectory away from the silent veil that awaited us.